What's up, miniature painters? Today we're going to take a look at a better way to speed paint black on our tabletop miniatures using a simple dry brush technique followed by an oil wash. Welcome to Trehane Miniatures. This method of painting black on a miniature is very much inspired by a video from Teddy KGB Miniatures where he paints a black Tau Ghost Keel battlesuit. The main takeaway that I got from Teddy's video is to substantially highlight the black using a series of lighter blue shades before coming in with a black oil wash to really seal the deal on the black, resulting in a nicely highlighted black finish. Now, I don't know if Teddy actually works for the KGB or if he just really enjoys Oreo cookies, but ever since subscribing to his channel, there has been a mysterious van parked outside my home, so I'm leaning towards the former. I don't know, maybe Teddy will share the story behind his channel name in the comments down below. I'm beginning with a model that is fully primed black. This is a very logical place to start for a mostly black color scheme, and this is the only black paint that I'm using on this model other than the wash. Alternatively, I could have followed up this primer with a matte black miniature paint that would provide a better finished look, but I feel that this is unnecessary due to the black oil wash that will ultimately serve as the main paint for our black finish. I begin dry brushing with Payne's Gray and a medium-sized dry brush. This is dry brushing in name only as I have the brush well loaded with paint and I'm covering all of the upward and outward facing details of the model, including the recesses. The general rule when painting black is that 50% or more of the surface area must remain black for the final result to read as black. We're going to go way above that percentage with our initial application of non-black paints. This will be saved by the wash later. The next dry brush layer consists of Iron Wolf by the Army Painter. This is going to be a more traditional mid-level dry brush, so I use my favorite dry brush palette to remove much of the paint from the brush before working it over the miniature. I'm using a size 5 dry brush for every layer of dry brush on this miniature. I use a set of artified goat hair brushes because they were recommended by Juan Hidalgo on his miniature painting channel. I like them, but they aren't groundbreaking by any means. And at $25 a set, they are a bit pricey for the abuse that dry brushes are known to endure. You can find similar sets of 5 brushes for about $7 on Amazon. I also find that the size 5 and 7 brushes are the real workhorses for miniatures of this size, and the other brushes in the set are really just bench warmers. The size 3 brush is pretty useless as a dry brush altogether, and I'd rather just use an old size 2 round brush for dry brushing smaller, hard to reach areas. With this dry brush layer, I begin to take the light source into consideration, which I want to be coming from the model's upper right side. Therefore, this dry brush layer adds paint to all of the areas that are facing up and to the model's right. The next lighter highlight that we use is Wolf Gray by the Army Painter. I'm being much more selective with the placement of this color. This is the point where I begin to create some significant highlights, so I want these on prominent features of the model that would catch the most light. This means that on the lower body in particular, I'm only hitting attributes that stick out a bit from the general silhouette of the figure. I'm also allowing more separation between these highlights. Whereas the first 2 color layers were applied continuously over the model, this color will have gaps between the highlights. I chose to go with a series of blue-gray colors for all of these dry brush layers because I feel that it adds more interest to the highlights than the typical grayscale that I see when highlighting black. I think that this choice of colors is what raises the finish above the typical slap chop black. Dry brushing from black to gray to white, followed by a black speed paint, leaves the model looking a little too monochromatic for my taste. The final highlight color for the black is Glacier Blue by Vallejo. I'm still using the size 5 dry brush to lightly hit a few key areas like the Black Panther's right knee, shoulder, and head. This is a very light dry brush with most of the paint removed from the brush. This step is more to create a smooth transition between the previous color and the more refined highlights that I'll place with this color. For these refined highlights, I switched to a size 1 standard brush and draw in some very opaque highlights that will represent the most intense reflections on the Black Panther suit. Painting with a dry brush followed by an oil wash as I'm doing in this video, and like I did with the Dole video, reminds me very much of slap chop, at least in a procedural sort of way. Both approaches to painting use a series of dry brush layers getting lighter in saturation and application with each subsequent layer, followed by a translucent wash of sorts. The only real difference between the 2 methods is at what point the color is added to the model. For For this oil wash method, color is applied during the dry brush steps and then a single color oil wash is used to add shadow and contrast to the piece. Whereas with slap chop, the depth and shadow is created during the grayscale dry brush steps and color is added with the use of washes or speed paints. The big difference for me is that I actually enjoy this oil wash method. Alright, and that's it for painting the black suit. Before the wash goes on, we just need to wrap up any other details that are present on the black parts of the model. In the Black Panther's case, this consists solely of a few metallic trinkets littered around his upper torso. I also painted the sculpted base prior to applying the wash, but I'm going to move that part to the end of the video along with the orange OSL for those who are interested in seeing the miniature fully painted up. But for now, we'll just press on with the black. For this oil wash, I used about 10 parts mineral spirits to every 1 part midnight black oil paint. I use a soft bristled brush to apply this wash liberally over the model. This method also works for conservatives. Something that I don't believe I've mentioned in my prior oil wash videos is that I use an older synthetic brush for these oil washes, and once I do that, I no longer use the brush for acrylic paints. I clean these brushes by swishing them around in a little bit of mineral spirits and dry them with a paper towel when I'm done. I don't use brush soap when cleaning these older brushes because I reserve that for my better brushes that I use with acrylic paints. Once the oil wash has dried for about 10 minutes, I use a small makeup application sponge to begin removing some of the oil wash. I'm only going to remove the wash from areas where I want the highlights to be more pronounced. This black oil wash is the main black color of the suit and it needs to remain present on most of the surface area of the suit. Some of the blue-gray underpainting will still show through this wash even in areas where we don't remove the wash. For the brightest highlights, I moisten the makeup applicator with a little mineral spirits to reveal the full intensity of the highlight. Now that the black speed painting portion is all wrapped up, I'll move on to painting the rest of the model. For the base, I'm going back to my size 5 dry brush to quickly slap a dark brown paint over everything. I'm choosing this brush because of its size, which does matter in some scenarios, and because of how quickly it slathers this paint on the miniature. I'm covering everything, but I don't obsess about getting into every little recess. If this brush can't reach it, then it's going to remain in deep shadow. Next, I used the same brush to dry brush a lighter brown over all of the raised surfaces. This is more of a true dry brush that hits just the raised surfaces to accentuate the details on the base. A lighter dry brush of yellow ochre is used on the sandy parts of the base to differentiate it from the large stone in the center. Then I hit all of the leafy bits with a couple of green paints. The brightest I'm going on the foliage is standard green. I don't want to highlight the base too much because I feel that this would detract from the main character. With the Black Panther being practically all black, I'm even more careful about leaving this base quite subdued compared to some of the other miniatures that I've worked on. I'm going to be adding an orange OSL to one side of the character, which should help draw the viewer's eye toward our hero. The final step for the base is to simply add a dark brown wash over everything. Alternatively, I could have painted the base along with the hero and then washed over everything with the main black oil wash, but I felt that this would entail a little more cleanup than I was willing to do. To improve the overall aesthetic of this piece, I'm going to add an orange backlight to the left rear of the miniature. This is kind of a cheap trick to add more interest to the color scheme. Orange is a complementary color to blue, which is somewhat present in the blue-gray highlights for the black suit. Orange and teal is greatly overused in art and cinema because of just how appealing it is to the human eye. There are a few theories as to why this is the case, which might be a cool topic to explore further in a future video. After using burnt red pearl acryl to dry brush the foundation for this orange OSL bounce light, I'm going to use some crimson red acrylic ink and a standard brush to intensify the red foundation within the burnt red perimeter. One challenge when creating OSL on a miniature manually with a paintbrush as opposed to using an airbrush is that I have to pay attention to all of the areas that would be affected by this light. I completely missed the upper left portion of Black Panther's head when applying the burnt red with the dry brush, so I correct this oversight with the crimson red. If I had used an airbrush for this initial layer, everything affected by the light would have been highlighted automatically without much thought involved. Next, I brush on some clear orange, first using a dry brush, then a little more precisely with a regular paintbrush. This clear orange is the mid-tone color for this bounce light. Clear orange works very well for layering this light effect because of how translucent it is. I apply this in a couple of layers, covering less area with each subsequent layer. Finally, I intensify this glow a little more by adding some ice yellow to the clear orange. I'm not taking these highlights too far. I want this orange backlight to accent the piece and not steal the viewer's attention from everything else that's going on here. With it all finished, I really like how this color scheme came together. I'm putting together another video where I achieve the same look but accomplish it much faster using an airbrush. I hope you check it out. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of painters.